Alright, hello. I'm Ben Lee, guys. Now today my topic is physician-assisted suicide or physician-assisted death. It's basically a form of suicide where the physician helps the patient. They're usually terminally ill patients, like cancer patients or whatnot. And they provide them with the knowledge and the means to commit suicide basically. But it's professional, it's not like you do it at home by yourself. So there's only 4 states that are legal in the United States with the PAS or the physician death. So it's only legal in Oregon, Montana, Washington, and Vermont. But my claim today is that legalizing the practice of PAS in the United States will lead to positive effects on the medical system today. So my first supporting claim is that physician-assisted suicide will cause hospitals to be more effective. And what do I mean by this is that more beds will open up if we get, as cruel as it sounds, if we get rid of the terminally ill patients if they use this. So how do we know if they're going to actually practice this physician-assisted suicide? In the research of 70 terminally ill patients, 73% of them thought that the practice of, I'll just say PAS because it's kind of long. So 70% of the patients thought PAS should be legalized in all states, and 40 out of 70 terminally ill patients, they would have considered using the physician-assisted suicide if the pain got too unbearable. And the hospitals in the U.S., there are a total of 920,829 beds in the United States, but that's less than 0.3% of our U.S. population, which is around 320 million. So if they do use it, if they do practice the physician-assisted suicide, then we will get more spaces and beds for other patients that needs to come in. And also, a lot of costly medicines are used for. I'm assuming that these practices are only going to be used by cancer patients, but for cancer treatment, medicine called Avastin, it cures in lung, kidney, and brain cancer. They cost $5,000 for 2 vials, and they could cost up to $100,000 per year for one patient. And also there's another medicine which is called Herceptin, and that's $4,000 per kid, and it could be up to $70,000 per year for a patient. So instead of this is kind of mean, but instead of wasting it on terminally ill patients, if you could reserve that, then it could be more accessible to other patients who need it. And third point of the first supporting claim is that doctors could actually save time by spending time with the more savable patients instead of the terminally ill. And because a lot of doctors, they tend to go up to seeing 30, 40, 50 patients per day if they really get through quickly. But a physician named Lewis Kohler, he stated, I would argue that if any practice has a significant amount of patients over the age of 50, then seeing more than about 25 to 30 patients a day is reasonable. So there's only a limited number of patients that doctors could see effectively, But if they're seeing the terminally ill patients, then that takes a lot of time away from other patients that might need more service from doctors. And my second point is that the PAS could be beneficial to patients and their families if it is legalized. So how is it beneficial? For patients, first of all, they do go through a tremendous amount of pain and suffering, especially for cancer patients. A 29-year-old stage 4 brain cancer patient named Brittany Maynard. So she did pass away. She did use physician-assisted suicide in Oregon, but she stated before she died, she stated, I discussed with many experts how I would die from the brain cancer, and it's terrible. So being able to choose to go with dignity is less terrifying. And before that, she suffered from frequent and long seizures severe head and neck pain, and stroke-like symptoms. So, yeah, so it hurts a lot, and if they could use this, then they could end it on their own. Secondly, right, the patient's families could also have another option to like save financially. Like I mentioned earlier, those medicines do cost a lot, and health insurances may not cover all of them. And even Medicare would only cover about $55,000 for Avastin, which I mentioned earlier, but it could potentially cost up to $100,000. So it is you could save financially if they chose to. And lastly, if you want to say, before your beloved family member passes away, you want to say goodbye to them, you want to say the last things you want to say to them. But with this, you could potentially set up a day where you can say goodbye and have all your thoughts. So that's about it, and I hope this convinced you guys. Physician-assisted suicide should be legalized, and it will have positive effects on the medical system.
Green after. That's okay, Obama was caring for that.
All right, well, the proposition's clearly identified. I don't think there's much dispute that dying is expensive. The real question is whether or not that expense is something that we can't afford. And of course, when we come to a value argument, which we're trying to avoid on this particular assignment, but if we were having a policy argument, the question then becomes whether or not that is an appropriate choice, an ethical choice, for instance. If we're going to prioritize based on people's condition, then there are potential problems that come up, and I think that might be a counterclaim that's presented here that doesn't necessarily get into the value issue, but suggests that the process of picking and choosing who lives on the basis of their condition is going to result in a variety of decisions that are problematic, dangerous, and maybe premature in some situations. I did think that you started off pretty well identifying the proposition. There's no structure for what the secondary points are in the preview, and in the body of the speech where it got a little bit confusing because point number 2 immediately followed point number 3, and I wasn't sure. I guess there were maybe 3 supporting points on the first point, and then we got to the second point, but it was not clear exactly how that was working, and that's one of the reasons why you want to have a preview at the beginning, so that I know that these other points that you're developing, they're still part of the first claim that you're making or the second claim that you're making. As it was, it felt a little bit like you're wandering around in the topic. And the issue of cost came up in like 3 different places. Instead of it all being concentrated in one area, it came up when we were talking, like at the end, for instance, you mentioned the Medicare issue and what it won't pay for. Why that wasn't connected to the argument earlier about what the cost of the particular medications were, I don't know. I do think you would need to demonstrate that people are being denied medical care because there aren't beds available. That's a presupposition in the argument that somebody's being harmed because sick people are in those beds. I shouldn't say sick people. Terminally sick people are in those beds. And defining when somebody's terminally ill and when they're occupying a bed, that's a different issue. I don't know that all terminally ill people are automatically hospitalized. That seems to be another presupposition, and I didn't hear any data about the number of people who are in all those beds that are in that particular condition. And then, like I said, the notion that somebody is being denied coverage or health because of these things, I think, is a little bit problematic. You have some speculation about what the number of doctors, number of patients that a doctor should be visiting with at any given point. but I didn't hear why that's efficient or inefficient, that it benefits somebody or hurts somebody. That's part of your argument, and you need to have some data on those particular points. And there are probably lots of other explanations as to why doctors are overwhelmed with the number of patients that they have that have little to do with whether or not they're dealing with terminal patients and everything to do with, all kinds of other issues. Yeah. All right. Thank you.